Have you ever wondered what might be hiding right under your feet? I mean, literally beneath the ground you walk on. Well, welcome to this explainer, because today we're peeling back the layers of the earth to uncover something absolutely mind-blowing. We are exploring Ghantasala. It was an ancient, sprawling Buddhist metropolis of trade and faith, and honestly, its story completely shatters everything we thought we knew about ancient globalization. So, let's jump right in.
To really appreciate this, you have to understand the contrast. Today, Ghantasala is this quiet, peaceful little village in Andhra Pradesh, India. You got farmers out working in the fields, kids playing on dusty dirt roads. It feels completely ordinary, right? But rewind 2,000 years, and the reality was radically different. We're talking about a bustling, deeply connected international metropolis. This place was packed with traveling scholars, sailors, and pilgrims from all over the world. It was a powerhouse filled with towering monuments. So the story of Ghantasala isn't just about digging up some old ruins. It's about resurrecting a completely lost civilization.
So you're probably asking, how did this one specific random spot become such a big deal? Well, like they say in real estate, location, location, location. Ghantasala sat right in the incredibly fertile Krishna River Delta. This was no accident. This strategic spot directly connected inland India straight to the Bay of Bengal. For an ancient merchant, this was a dream come true. They could seamlessly move massive amounts of goods via inland rivers and then straight out onto maritime ocean routes. It was basically the ancient equivalent of a global superhighway.
Now, for the longest time, historians were scratching their heads. They'd been poring over these old geographical records and trade documents that kept mentioning this incredibly wealthy city called Ghantasala or Ghantasala, but nobody knew where it actually was. It was like a giant historical puzzle. It wasn't until major archaeological discoveries were finally made that researchers could definitively connect those ancient texts to the physical ruins of Ghantasala. And wow, when they proved that connection, it was a total game changer. It instantly flipped this quiet farming village back into the legendary commercial hub it used to be.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, the Golden Age, Rise of a Metropolis. So how did they build this empire? Well, even before Buddhism arrived, the incredibly rich farmland generated a ton of wealth, which laid a really solid foundation. Then, right between the 1st century BCE and the 3rd century CE, the mighty Satavahana dynasty stepped in and took control. Under their rule, trade just exploded. They started building monumental architecture, which ushered in this peak era of prosperity that lasted until the 4th century CE. During this golden window, Ghantasala was firing on all cylinders as both an elite commercial hub and a deeply revered spiritual center.
Which actually brings up a really fascinating question. With all this aggressive commerce and global trading going on, why did Buddhism flourish right here in the middle of it?
The answer is actually incredibly practical. It's all about this brilliant symbiotic relationship between trade and faith. You see, historically, Buddhism spread fastest along major trade routes, and it makes total sense when you think about it. Merchants were traveling these long, incredibly dangerous distances, and they needed a safe place to crash. Buddhist monasteries provided exactly that. Secure rest houses, plus educational centers and moral guidance. In return, these super wealthy traders donated massive fortunes to fund the construction of even more monasteries. It was a win-win. The monks and the merchants literally built an environment where both could absolutely thrive.
Let's dive into our next section, the sacred center, the Great Mahastupa.
If you wanted to find the beating heart of the city's spiritual life, you'd look for the Mahastupa. Now, don't just picture a mound of dirt here. We're talking about a massive, highly engineered architectural marvel made of brick. It was a visual representation of the cosmic order, the path to enlightenment, and the literal presence of the Buddha. Pilgrims would travel from miles and miles away just to walk around it in a sacred circular ritual known as pradakshina. And just think about the sheer human effort it took to build this, making tens of thousands of bricks, mapping out complex layouts, hiring master craftsmen. This towering structure would have completely dominated the ancient skyline. But the thing is, the Mahastupa didn't stand there all by itself. It anchored this vast, awe-inspiring, sacred landscape. All around it, you had viharas, which are monasteries, along with grand prayer halls and massive residential blocks that housed hundreds of monks. It was kind of like an Ivy League campus of the ancient world. Scholars were there teaching, debating, meditating. Plus, the incredible artistry, all those intricate lotus motifs and sacred symbols, connects Ghantasala straight to the famous Amaravati artistic tradition. We're talking about master artisans carving absolute masterpieces right there in the complex.
Let's try to really picture this. Imagine, you're actually walking through the streets of Ghantasala 2,000 years ago. Dawn breaks, and the air is instantly filled with the chanting of monks.
while right next door, merchants are loudly packing up their caravans for the road. Fast forward to midday, and the energy is just electric. Pilgrims are circling the stupa, scholars are deep in heated philosophical debates, and traders are aggressively haggling over international deals in the markets. Then, evening rolls around. Warm lamps light up the massive monasteries, and travelers from distant, exotic lands sit around sharing wild stories from their journeys. It was just such a vibrant, incredibly alive city.
All right, let's look at Section 3, the Global Gateway, Ancient Global Trade Networks. If you only take one single thing away from this explainer today, let it be this. Ancient India was not isolated, not even a little bit. It was deeply, intricately connected to the wider world. The discoveries at Ghantasala completely shatter the myth that ancient civilizations lived in their own little bubbles. Goods, ideas, and people were constantly crossing oceans in a highly organized, highly connected global network.
To put this in perspective, during the early centuries CE, Indian merchants were shipping out unbelievable wealth. We're talking fine textiles, precious stones, ivory, and of course pepper. Seriously, the Romans were so obsessed with Indian pepper that they basically treated it like gold. In exchange, the Romans were desperate to offload their own wealth and specialized goods, like glass beads, to get their hands on these luxuries. Ghantasala was sitting right there, acting as this wealthy maritime gateway, scooping up the immense profits of all this transoceanic commerce. So really, the trade financed the civilization, and the civilization built the monuments.
Which brings us to our final section, Echoes in the Earth, Rediscovering a Lost World.
Now, every great city faces a turning point, right? And Ghantasala's decline is still kind of a mystery. It looks like it was basically a perfect storm of bad luck. Major global trade routes slowly began to shift and bypass the city. Then you had big political and economic shakeups in the region. Even the environment might have turned against them, with coastal changes making the port way harder to access. And crucially, as all of this happened, the wealthy merchants stopped coming, which meant the massive donations funding those Buddhist monasteries completely dried up. Slowly, the city faded, the monks left, the traders moved on, and over the centuries, nature literally just swallowed the entire landscape.
For hundreds of years, this entire sprawling metropolis was completely forgotten, just farmland, until the archaeologists showed up. Enter Alexander Rhea, one of the most critical figures in rediscovering the city. Just imagine the thrill of being this guy. You're digging into what looks like an ordinary farmer's field, and suddenly your shovel hits the massive, ancient brick foundation of a totally forgotten world. Rhea and his team painstakingly dug up the sculptures, the base of the giant stupa, and the vast monastic ruins, literally piecing this historical puzzle back together for us.
But honestly, the most magical thing they found wasn't the bricks. It was the Brahmi inscriptions. Bricks don't talk, right? But written words absolutely do. These priceless ancient records were carved straight into the stone by the actual people who lived there. They list the names of the wealthy donors, they show us how the local language was evolving, and they record their everyday cultural traditions. When you read those inscriptions, it's like the men and women who walked the streets of Ghantasala 2 millennia ago are reaching right across time to speak directly to us. It's incredible.
When you pull all these threads together, it is completely obvious why historians and archaeologists absolutely geek out over this site. Ghantasala perfectly maps out how religion spread across South India. It's concrete proof of the staggering wealth generated by ancient trade. It tracks the beautiful evolution of regional art, and it highlights absolute genius in monumental architecture. But above all else, it proves that ancient globalization was very, very real. When experts look at Ghantasala, they don't just see ruins. They see human ambition, deep devotion, and cultural exchange at its absolute peak.
I want to wrap up by leaving you with this final thought, straight from our source material today. The next time someone says history is boring, tell them about Ghantasala, a forgotten city where monks prayed, merchants traded with distant lands, artists created masterpieces, and a great stupa rose above the landscape nearly 2,000 years ago. The stories of our ancient world are quite literally still hidden right beneath our feet, just waiting to be dug up. So what else do you think is out there, buried in the soil, ready to completely change everything we know about who we are? Until our next discovery, keep digging.